pupil voice goals for the academic year ahead. My name is Sam Evans. I'm the head of programs at Smart School Councils. I'm here with my colleague Karen, who I'm going to ask her to introduce herself one more time. So Karen, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Karen. I'm the new membership manager for Smart School Councils. I come from a teaching background myself, taught for 15 years in primary schools in Yorkshire. Big advocate for anything that raised pupil voice, such as PSHE, philosophy for children. And then I moved to the charity sector a couple of years ago, and then I got the opportunity to work at Smart School Council. So I'm really excited to see how our growing membership across the country can help raise pupil voice.
Lovely. Thanks, Karen. So what's our agenda ahead of us this afternoon? So we've got three sort of things to consider, three things we'd like to achieve with the time we've got set, which is 45 minutes. And that's to say hi and see how everyone's doing. Thank you for engaging with our slightly comical sort of warm-up question. And then we're going to get into the meat of our CPD, which is the structure that we're going to share with you for setting pupil voice goals for the year ahead. There's a resource that supports it that we will be referencing throughout and will be emailed to you at the end of this CPD. So don't feel like you need to take a plethora of notes unless it's something that you're really into, then in which carry on. Or that you have to remember what's being said, because that resource is going to help you follow the same steps that we're going to share to you during the CPD. And then the third thing we're going to ask you to consider is how else we can help you this year. So every year we as a team sit down and think about what the subjects are going to be for our CPD every half term, and that's fine and all very well and good, but I think it'd be even better if we're being led by you as our membership in what support, what subjects, what type of events you would be interested in receiving throughout the academic year 2021-2022. So we're going to end with that question. If you've got any questions as we're going along, and I'm going to ask you some questions as we go along and ask for you to contribute a bit like you have already, the chat box is the place to do that. And what we have traditionally say, and I think we always will because it's a very helpful thing to say, is that should you want to have a chat with either myself or Karen at the end of the CPD, then we are in the habit of sticking around for 10 minutes or so, and we'll encourage you to turn your camera on and your microphone on, and you can have a chat to us if you're looking to get some additional support or ask some more sort of intimate questions. That sounds weird, but you know what I mean. Yeah, don't ask me any intimate questions, please. Anyway, you know what I mean. Karen, you're going to take us through our obligatory reminder of Smart School Councils in a few minutes, just so that we're all on the same page, and then we'll get into setting our goals for the year. So I'll hand over to you, Karen, for the time being.
Thanks for that, Sam. Yeah, I know all of you will have seen these first few slides before, and I know our focus is obviously pupil voice, but it's always good to start with just a 5-minute recap. So as you know, our charity founded 5 years ago. It's growing. We've got over 300 member schools and continue to grow every day. A huge range of schools that join us. And as you can see at the bottom of the slide, supported by a growing number of organisations. I'm not going to emphasize, I don't need to emphasize this with you guys. As educators, we all believe that we should lead change and help children lead change through using their voice, but it's not always easy. The traditional model of school councils does have its issues. I think if we're being honest, we all know that. Often these are the 5 big things, especially when I think myself, when I was in school, these are the big things that come up every single year, particularly for me personally. It was always number 1 and 5 that used to come up, especially number 5, the usual suspects, kids who already had multiple roles in school. So would also be house captains, also be team captains, also be on student council, and quite an exclusive model. Whereas, as you know, Smart School Councils does that differently, and it flips it on its head, and it includes all pupils on the Smart School Council. As you can see from Children's Commissioner, they also think that traditional models of school councils could be improved. The University of Roehampton research, I guess that links to the usual suspects that we mentioned, those normally those kids who have perhaps more privilege, perhaps more support at home, bigger voice in traditional models, whereas perhaps those kids who have less support, less advantage, have a smaller voice in traditional models of school councils. You'll all be aware of this by now. It will be hopefully a very common and a very easy to understand illustration, which clearly explains how Smart School Councils is different and how it's split into those three groups. So those class meetings that are run regularly to get pupil voice heard and all children's voice on the Smart School Council. The communication team, the ones who run it, the ones who chase up the classes to make sure they've done the class meetings. And those action teams, those doers in school, those kids who like to lead change and start those action groups throughout their settings. So I'm going to hand over to Sam, who's going to explain those 6 simple planning tips to help you get started for pupil voice.
Thank you very much, Karen. That was superbly introduced, and thanks to Karen and her excellent oratory, I'll never forget what my job is, so that's always good for me as well. Right, so let's get into the meat of the training then, which is looking towards the year ahead. So I recognise that we're fast approaching half term, and that might seem like a strange time to be considering the goals that we might want to set for the year ahead. But I think it's probably fair to say that at the start of the year, the pressures that you face as teachers and the competing priorities mean that now is a good time to look at pupil voice, and that we want to try and prioritize that even amongst all of the sort of competing interests that we have. And so the purpose of this training and the way that it's been planned by the team is to share with you a structure, 6 points to consider, which will then frame your approach for the year, and is supported by the resource that, as I mentioned at the start, that we'll share with you later on. And it'll help you to answer those 6 questions or those 6 points with a particular plan for you to stick towards. So what we'll do is we'll go through each one. We'll talk about some examples. Before this CPD took place, Greg sent out a sort of survey. Many of you who are attending this afternoon responded to that survey that will give us some talking points for each step. And I'll also ask you some questions to consider in your role, in your school, in your setting, how you might begin to plan what your goals are going to be across the next academic year. So I think I've set that up reasonably well, and we'll get into our first point. So our first point is a simple one, which is to commit to a schedule. The purpose of us trying to share this framework with you is to say, very simply, well, look, we all know that our goal, whether we're new on the program or whether we're an established member, is to have the Smart School Council model running effectively across the course of this academic year. And by that, we mean both, not both, but all action teams, comms team, and the class meetings. We know that's our goal, and that's fantastic. That's exactly where it should be. But that goal is only achieved if we allow ourselves, or if we create for ourselves a schedule with individual steps to get us to that point. We recognize this when we plan our own sort of goals for a term, or any of the projects that we help to run as a charity. And it's all very well and good having a goal, but unless we know how we're going to get there, unless we have this step-by-step process that gets us to that end point, we've already missed a step. We've already missed a trick. We're not making life easier for ourselves. And so that's our first point, which is to commit to a schedule, not just create one, but to commit to it. Now, it will the schedules that we create, well, we'll talk about now, and you'll create hopefully today or tomorrow, will look very diverse. I'm sure they'll look very different depending upon the school's needs, upon how sort of well integrated you are with the program. But that's fine. They are going to be a reflection of where you are at the moment. But what we want to ensure that we're doing is saying whatever that schedule is going to be, however complex or simple it's going to be, we're going to commit to it, because ultimately this is what's going to make the difference for our young people and our schools. So there are questions like this. How many class meetings are you going to have this year? How many action teams are you aiming to have set up throughout the academic year? These are the sorts of questions that will help us to frame a schedule from this point until summer next term. Debbie, you're already asking how many class meetings do we advise you to have, which is probably a reminder from me to waffle less. And also, secondly, it's a good point for which we're going to address in a second. So you're pushing me in the right direction, Debbie, but let me get there first. Let me share with you some examples from schools. So when we sent out this survey a couple of weeks ago, we asked this question of the teachers who responded, and we have an interesting range of goals for schools to achieve in terms of the number of class meetings this year. They range on the left-hand side with Charlotte in Ravensbury with 3 class meetings through to Park House, whose goal it is this year to run 40 class meetings, which Karen and I were trying to work this out before we started. I think means more than 1 a week with the weeks that are available in term, which is an incredible achievement if Park House get there. And maybe it's an aspirational one. But the purpose of me sharing this with you, I suppose, is to say, look, this is different and dependent upon how you want to approach it as a school. We've got advice. I'm going to give you that advice in a second, but I think it's really interesting to note that depending upon how new you are to the program, how well established you are, what your needs are as a school, this is something that can range from very easy to achieve, or well, I'd say they're very easy to achieve wherever they are, but very few to a lot more. Broadly speaking, this is how we capture this question as an organization. So we think about 1 per term, 1 per half term, 2 per half term, fortnightly, weekly. Those are the ways that we tend to couch these. And if you've ever met me before, done a launch with me before, or had a one-to-one with me before, you will know what I'm about to say next. As far as the impact that this intervention can have in your school, it's very clear. The more class meetings that you run, the bigger the change that you're going to see in school, the more your young people are given opportunity to develop skills, the greater their sense of connection and community and sort of importance with pupil voice and priority that it has within school. The status is what I'm looking for, it has within school. So the majority of the schools on our program will run them weekly, like Debbie is doing, which is a fantastic start. But that isn't to say that is the only way of running them. You know, if you've launched with us very recently, that we give you a target, which is at least 12 across the academic year. And as much as I can see why there are arguments to say you might want to do 6 like Lyndon or 3 like Charlotte, I think that's where we would advise the majority of our members to be, to aiming towards that 12 mark, because that will give you the best opportunity to sit down at the end of the academic year, look back and say, right, this is the difference that Pupil Voice has made in our school this year, because we've had 12 class meetings, 12 subjects discussed, 12 outcomes related, at least 12 actions to try and create and shape and mold our school community in a way that's informed by our young people. So that's where we are with our class meetings. But ultimately, it's up to you. It's up to you to decide how many you're going to set across the academic year. But this is an important part of the planning process in deciding what your schedule should be. So I'm going to ask you, a bit like Debbie has in the chat box so far, to please let us know what your thoughts are on the number of class meetings. It's I guess, the pivotal part of our intervention. It's the cog at which all of our student voice goals will depend upon across the course of the year. So yeah, let us know. It would be great to see you sharing with us how many class meetings you think you're going to be able to achieve this year and what your goal is going to be. You don't have to share all of the plan with us, because that's something we'll share with you later on, but this is a question we're particularly keen to hear your answer on, and to consider what best enables you to have a great impact through the intervention and meets your school's needs. So as you're responding to my question, which is fantastic, I'm going to talk about the next part of the schedule, which is the action teams. And then I'll come back to you, Karen, to highlight any comments that you've seen that you think are worth sharing with everybody else in terms of that goal or that schedule of class meetings for the year. So action teams then, there are a number of options, I suppose, that we can consider when we set a schedule for these. And this will very much depend upon where you are in the program, but here's how best we've captured them. So action teams, we can start with the spectrum that says we'll try and we'll do as many as we possibly can this year, to the other end of the spectrum, which is we are new to the program and it's too early for us to consider how many action teams we're going to run this year. We're concentrating on other things, and that might be the communications team and setting your leadership group and getting your class meetings running. And if that's the case, that is absolutely fine. But I think it's important for us to share, for established members, for members who know that they are considering action teams this year, what your schedule should be with those. It's really, I think, what I've seen anyway with schools is that it's best practice often if you set a particular target associated with a term or a half term for how many action teams you'd like to see, and structure it a little bit more. Because if it's too open-ended, sometimes it can either be a little bit overwhelming or nothing actually happens with it. Whereas if you know, right, we're going to have 2 or 3 or 4 spaces for action teams this term, and you write that into your plan for the year, then it gives something for your comms team to work towards, start chasing people towards, and something that you can be accountable for at the end of the year. So when we are considering this schedule, these are our 2 points. How many class meetings are we going to run this year? And what's our plan with action teams? Is it too early for us? That's okay. If we are going to go for it, how many would we like to see so we can make sure that we are accountable for it? I can see that there's a question that has come through, which is absolutely not a silly question, about what an action team is, which I will take the opportunity to reply to now so that you're not confused about that as we carry on with the CPD. And then, Karen, I'll come to you to share some highlights from what our members are considering for their targets is the wrong word, for their schedule for class meetings this year. Let me just jump back a couple of slides and I'll share this with you. So I think I want to say your name's Leanne. I'm really sorry if I've mispronounced your name there. But your question was, what are action teams? You can see our structure of the intervention here. Action teams are self-selected groups of young people who are supported by our intervention to come together to create change. The way that we often talk about action teams is that is the following. So in a class meeting where every young person across your institution has been discussing a question that you've set for them or the comms team set for them, they voted on the outcome of that question, so what they think the winning option should be. That question might involve an action. Let's say it's about your school's carbon emissions. And the chorus of opinion across schools says we think we should tackle our carbon emissions by cycling more to school. And action team's place in this intervention is there. They come along and say, okay, well, our action is to encourage more people to cycle to school. We need an action team who are going to campaign to make that a reality, or fundraise to create bike racks outside so we can give a space for people to lock up their bikes, which might encourage them to come to school a bit more. They are groups of young people from anywhere across the school who are connected by that passion, that idea that they care about what could change, and they come together to try and create that. That's what action teams are. If you're not sure still about that, come back to us later on. We can talk to you again, but I just didn't want to leave you hanging there a bit confused about what we're talking about. Right, so let's come back to our schedule, which is our first point. And Karen, anything you want to highlight from what's been said across the membership with targets for the number of class meetings?
Just that it's a very positive response. So we've got quite a few here. So we've got people aiming for 12, which is great, because we said if you can do at least 12 over the year, that's a really strong start to the year. But then we have quite a few people who are having fortnightly meetings, such as Abigail. We've got a few schools who are doing weekly meetings, which is fantastic, especially, straight away at the start of the year. That's wonderful. So there's a few who are doing that. And then we've got some people like Kerry, I think it was. Yep, Kerry, who's mentioned that she's also using the class meeting during some assembly time. And I've heard a few schools who use it during assembly time, which is a really good kind of tool to raise discussion within school settings. But yeah, it's a really positive start. It seems like we've got a lot of passionate people who are aiming high for the first year, which is awesome.
Thanks, Karen. That does sound really good. And I noticed there were a few comments in there as well with some of our newest members who have spent this half term preparing and are officially launching after half term. I think an example of that was from Lorraine, I think, who says they're going to do their weekly class meeting starting after half term, and as they're in Scotland, which Greg will always be a big fan of, our members of Scotland, in Scotland rather. We know your half terms next week, which I'm sure lots of teachers from elsewhere will be very envious about. Cool, great. So that sounds really good. I think we've got a clear picture then for the first step of our plan for the year ahead, which is how many class meetings, what's our target for those, and then where do we consider action teams. Yeah, Greg's. I think that's meant to be a Scottish flag that Greg has posted, but I think it's been sort of dwindled out. But never mind. Lorraine, you've got a really good question here about class meetings and how we start before you set up your action groups. If that's okay, we'll make a note of that to come back to at the end, Lorraine. So Karen, if you could remind me about that later on. I want to make a bit more progress with the points we've in our plan, and then we'll come back to that if that's okay. I sounded a bit like a politician then, didn't I? Taking the intervention in the House of Commons. I want to make a bit more progress, and then I'll come in. Anyway, so our second point is to create micro goals. Don't know why there's a Formula One car on there, but it's there. And this might sound a bit jargony, but the purpose, I suppose, for this is to say, look, we know we've got this bigger aim, this broader aim with the intervention, and we know that committing to a schedule is going to help us to get there. But that it's a big dream to some extent. And I guess it's like that analogy that people always often say, and they used to say this to me when I started in my sort of teaching career, that a long journey, an arduous journey, a laborious journey starts with a single step. And I guess that's the point of this second action here, which is to consider, okay, well, what are our micro goals? What are our immediate goals? Especially for our newer members who are considering how they get started with the intervention from where you are today to where you want to be, say, by half term, which is a week away or 2 weeks away for some of us, depending upon where we are, or by Christmas. If we sort of try and filter our thoughts, not just for the academic year as a whole, but where we're going to be over the next couple of weeks, we're going to help ourselves make lots of smaller steps of progress that will ultimately facilitate a bigger and broader success towards the end of the year. So questions like these to consider. When are you starting meeting with your communications team, which is often the first place that teachers go to on the intervention? I know that sometimes teachers feel, and I would do this if I was in school, to be honest, feel very excited to get going with the class meetings and might start by running those. But I think we're doing this intervention best when we are ensuring that our communications team, our student leadership group, are set up and established first, and that they are feeding into the process of creating and selecting questions for the class meetings before they're sent out. So is that what one of our micro goals is? Is it to meet with the communications team? For a new member, is it to meet with the current school council and help them rebrand as a communications team? Is one of our micro goals going to be that we just want to do one class meeting before half term or 2 class meetings before Christmas? Because I feel like that's a more manageable place for me in my school right now, because we've got Ofsted in, or we've got loads of other things going on. Is that going to be one of our micro goals that means that we can be active and we can celebrate the success of those little goals that will help us to form the habits and the behaviors of a lifetime moving forward? So that's what we're going to consider. Now, there are some examples of this that have come from the survey that we sent out before the CPD. So this was a week or 2 ago, and we thought it would be really nice to share with you some of the micro goals from the teachers who answered that survey. So here we are. First one's, I'm learning about the program and briefing my staff this half term, which is like a fundamental place to be with getting this program going. It might not sound like a lot, but learning about how the intervention works, getting questions like, what are action teams and how do they work? Should I start my communications team before I do class meetings? All those sorts of things, and getting the right answers to them are ultimately going to make us more successful. And if that's what our goal is going to be for the next week or 2, then that's a really good goal. And you know that the team are here to help you with that. Another example from the survey was that this one. I've just started and I'm focusing on getting a first class meeting done by the end of this term, so by Christmas time, which again is a very manageable place to be for a micro goal that again sets the behavior and the habit for what we're going to accelerate and ramp up after Christmas, hopefully. Third one, I'm starting with a communications team and then doing a class meeting. That's a more traditional way of doing it, which is great. And then fourth, the class meetings are all set up and going well. Comms team's elected, had first 2 meetings, and the action teams are just getting off the ground. So there you've got an example there of what might be a more ambitious micro goal. So saying, okay, well, my micro goals aren't to create the program across the terms for the year, but to get them all up and running quite quickly. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to elect our comms team. We're going to have 2 meetings with them immediately. Within them, we're going to get our action teams off the ground following the class meetings we're going to set up following those comms team meetings. So again, again, there's a spectrum here. I think the overarching message I'm probably laboring a little bit is that we can set these goals depending upon the needs that you've got in your school, and you know them best. So whatever they are, one of the things to do in the resource that we'll send you at the end is decide what your micro goals are going to be for the next couple of weeks, maybe a term at the most, not much more than that, so that we know we can make small steps towards getting the overall intervention up and running and being successful with it. Karen, anything you want to highlight from the comments at this point before we move on to our next point?
Yeah, there is a question from Marin. Marin obviously works in a small setting. So she says, I work in a school with only 40 children, 12 Key Stage 1, the rest in Key Stage 2. Would you recommend having just one team?
In just one team? So that's a really interesting question. Thanks very much for it, Merrin. We've been talking quite a lot recently to schools of a similar size to yours and smaller in some cases. I think I was chatting to a school yesterday whose entire pupil role was 6 students. And for them, the intervention does look a bit different, but I think it's one of the strengths for the way that we've designed it is that it is adaptable in that way. So for them, their focus was going to be on just creating class meetings and giving them regular opportunities to discuss the questions and vote on the outcomes therein. And then within that, then they would have a space once a half term for a single action team to try and bring about change related to one of the questions they've asked every week. So if that's what you mean by one team, having sort of like one leadership group or one team or one sort of group of young people who are going to discuss a class meeting, then absolutely that would work in that case. I think my position is that you can still access all 3 parts of the program. Within 40 young people, you will have a group of 2 or 3 or 4 who will feel strongly about something, who want to create an action team about it. You'll have a group of 6 or 7 who might be leadership candidates who can take on the communications team role. But that if you're going to get everyone involved as one big group in the class meetings, I think that makes sense for me. So it's a really good question. Anything you'd add to that, Karen? Are you happy with that answer? Are you happy with that answer? Right, good. Let's keep going then. So the third thing for us to consider in our yearly plan is to be honest about blockers, which I'm aware sounds a little bit like corporate speak, but essentially it's about us being self-aware with the challenges that we know we face in school when it comes to delivering this intervention. Here are some examples of them. I know I've no idea what I'm doing. I'm just getting started with Smart School Councils and I'm a bit confused. If that's how you feel and if that's where you are, then when you're considering what your plan looks like this term, we've got to be upfront about that. We've got to start with this idea that you need some support from us as a team, or maybe someone else who's going to come in and give you the guidance that you need. Another example of some blockers or some things that we know are challenges to overcome are getting across the idea it's different from the normal school council. Again, this is something that links to schools who are early on in their time with us at Smart School Councils. And we know that there sometimes can be a bit of a hesitancy to accept change within school, particularly when the traditional school council model, with all of its flaws, and we're well aware of what they are, it retains a lot of love within schools and people don't want to see the end of it. So is that going to be one of the blockers we face in school? Making the communications team more self-managing is the sort of blocker that more established members have sometimes. They find that their intervention is working really well, but it's maybe involving too much adult support. They'd like the communications team to be a bit more autonomous. Reluctant staff. I'm not going to comment on that anymore because it's a thing that we know that we face. And then one of the other blockers, and I think this can't be overemphasized for where we are as a society and as an education sector at large, is getting up and running again after COVID is really difficult. The last sort of 2 academic years have looked so different, and there is going to be a lot of change that students and staff are facing at the moment. So the idea is we need to know, and we're asking you to know about what your challenges are that you face in school, and being self-aware about them and upfront about them so that we're not disappointed by them when we face them. If we say it to ourselves on the 6th of October, it's all going to be great. I mean, I love the attitude, and I'm sure that's at some level true. But when we come across these blockers that we can otherwise spend a little bit of time thinking about now, we might get disheartened, disappointed. This is when educational interventions like ours and like many others often fall by the wayside because we haven't considered what the challenges are and how we overcome them. And that's what the fourth point is all about. So when you've considered what your blockers are and the challenges that you will face in school, we can then seek to identify the help that you need to overcome them. And I think this is about, as I keep emphasizing, this honest appraisal of what our situation is in school and then what we do about it. So getting those blockers down, really important. Then we can move on to our fourth point, which is, okay, well, who's on your side? Which sounds a bit tribal, but I agree with it. Who is it in school that's there with you? Have you been asked to take a lead on pupil voice by a member of the senior leadership team, or is this success dependent, tied to a TLR that you've got, or whatever it might be? Who in school can we identify? And I want to use this phrase very sensibly as like an ally, as someone that you can turn to if you need support, to get other teachers involved, to take on some of the responsibility that you have with you. Who else might it be? Well, obviously the answer is us as a team. Karen expertly leads our sort of membership team and our group alongside Greg and I to ensure that we are doing everything proactively to help you, and you can reach out to us with any query, big or small, and we've got your back too. And then there's also the possibility then of reaching out to other teachers on the program. There are sort of, there are 40 odd teachers who were registered to come along to the CPD this afternoon. And we've got hundreds of members. That is a really big community that we're really keen to tap into as a resource, maybe a bit more than we currently do, in linking you up together and having opportunities to come and discuss how you're founding running the intervention, sharing best practice. I'll come back to this point at the end because I think we've got some questions we can ask you. But there is absolutely that opportunity within the community to reach out for support. I know Karen's got a particular fly in your bonnet, I don't know if that's the right idiom, but let's go with it, about the Facebook group at the moment, and about sort of wanting more of our members to come along to the Facebook group and more of our members to get involved in posting and chatting. So if you're not in our private teachers Facebook group and Facebook is functioning and not shut down, then you should definitely come along to it. I think Karen may have a link for you to access it, which you'll post in the chat box if you haven't yet joined it. That would be great to see as another avenue. So those two come as a pair. What are your blockers, and who can help you to overcome those blockers, and where are your who's on your side and who is your ally in doing it? Abigail thinks that linking up will be a great support. Yeah, we couldn't agree more. It's definitely something that we're keen to facilitate. So just if it wasn't clear enough already, do reach out to us if that's something you'd like to explore, and then we can consider who and how we go about that. And when I say please reach out to us, I don't just mean those who are interested in receiving support. I'm also talking to you older members, no, that's the wrong word, more established members rather, who've been on the program for a while, to reach out to us if you are interested in being approached by a school that's just getting started and offering a little bit of sort of mentoring support. So we'd like to hear from you either way, because that's something we'd love to facilitate. Right, okay, we're nearly there, folks, and we've got 10 minutes left. So our fifth and then our sixth point, I think, are coming up now. The fifth point is a general sort of call to arms, if you will, to help us throughout the academic year, both in the practical sense of setting ourselves a schedule, but also in like the sort of emotional sense, which is to remember the why. Why are we spending time on this? Why are we devoting our energy to it? What difference is this going to make? And this is something that we come back to a lot as a team when we have the sort of peaks and troughs of running the organization. And it's something we would suggest you do, and you can share with your staff as well. And it says it here really clearly. Ultimately, you're leading a program that is helping every pupil's voice to get involved in having a say. And that matters. It matters on a moral level. It matters on a statutory level. It matters on a level, whoever, if this sort of thing ticks your box, that you will be asked about and inspected about and asked to be able to demonstrate. And so when we need to recognize that what we're doing is important. It might not always have the priority it deserves within school, but then I think the challenge is up to us then to ensure that it does, and to persuade our colleagues or SLT or whoever it might be that more time, more energy, more resource needs to be devoted to ensuring that young people are shaping their own school communities, because what could be more important than that? And then the final point here is that, I guess there are two ends of this. We've got the stick and we've got the carrot, right? I've just given you the carrot. The stick is going back to the old model, is only going to find ourselves in this position where we're doing our young people a disservice by only giving a small group of young people an opportunity to lead change and have their voice heard and get involved in democracy. I know that for lots of teachers in school, they might run their school council for a while, or their smart school council for a year or two, and then hand over that responsibility to someone else. But I guess what I would say to you is this: whenever you're doing that, when you're handing over or you're asking other colleagues to take a lead on this, think about what happens if we revert back to the old model and how our young people are being let down, and consider that in giving whoever is going to help you or take over the program at some point the opportunity to get on board with what is the Smart School Council. And then lastly, very, very finally, celebrate the wins. And there's an opportunity for us to consider this in the resource that I'll share with you in a second, and we'll email that to you at the end so you can complete these steps and get your plan sorted for the year. Wins are big and they are small. A win might absolutely be having a absolutely banging one-to-one with Karen where she explains something to you that you didn't understand before. That is definitely a small win to celebrate if you feel like you need some support from us. Or a small win might be that you've sat down with your old school council, you've shared with them the vision for what a smart school council is, and they're really excited. If they're excited and if they are keen to get everybody else involved, that's a massive win, and we should be celebrating those as we move along. And celebrating wins isn't just, for me anyway, an internal thing, it's an external thing. It's being able to say in a staff meeting or in a one-to-one with your sort of line manager in school or whoever, yeah, we've got our intervention, it works, I understand it. That's a win. For some people, a win is going to be setting up your first class meeting because you don't feel very comfortable with technology. And that's something to celebrate if you get that far, as well as then being able to ultimately then say, we've done, like Park House, 40 class meetings this academic year. That is involved, 100% of our schools 100% of our students in participating with their pupil voice. And on average, 98% of our classes got involved every week. Those are the big wins, and we should celebrate those as much as we should celebrate the small ones. And celebrating them should be a communal activity, not just something we do for ourselves. Right, I've taken us through what are our 6 points or 6 steps within the academic year planner. And on the screen now, what you can see is a resource that we're going to share with you in an email that will be downloadable as a PDF. And you can, if you're technologically great, you can add information to it, type information into it into a PDF, and then save a copy of it there. Or if you prefer, you can print it off and you can fill it out in the analog way. And this will then contextualize the structure I've shared with you this afternoon to then go into what your answers are. So you can see you've got your goals at the top there, number of class meetings, what your goal is going to be for the percentage of classes who take part. Is it every class every week? Is it 8% of the classes every week? Whatever. What's your target for that? The number of action teams you'd like to support, how your communications team is going to function. And then we've got these reflective questions. Why do you have a Smart School Council? How can you tell more students and staff about that why? What's going to get in your way, the blockers, the barriers, who can help you in overcoming them? And then we've broken the year down by half terms for you to have a broad sense of what you want to achieve within those half terms. You would be very, very welcome to access some support in completing these. So Karen, I'm putting you on the spot here, but if you wouldn't mind, would you post a link to a one-to-one? So if anyone wants to book in a one-to-one with the team to discuss the planner and what should go in each part, you can do that over the course of the next week. Of course, you're very welcome to hang around in 4 minutes time when we're finished with our CPD and talk to either Karen and I if you'd like to, or just go away and fill out your planner and then, I don't know, send us an email with an image of it, or tweet us with a picture to say this is what you're going to do this year, because I think we'd love to see what your plans look like, as well as thank you and encourage you to take the time to do it. So a couple more things. This is something I think we as a team feel really strongly about. Thanks for putting the one-to-one link in there, Karen. When we consider the remainder of the academic year, we do one of these CPD training meetings, whatever you want to call it, webinars, every half term. So half term 1 is about setting our goals for the year. Hopefully we've done that well and you felt like it was a really good use of your time. However, we would really like to know what else you would like us to cover this academic year. So we'll have one of these in half term 2 before Christmas. I think it's booked in for sort of November time, meant to be end of November. What would you like us to cover as a subject? And then considering spring and summer term, there are 4 more. What else would you think would be great to get some support with? We've given you some suggestions here, which are sort of help with your comms team, and I will mention them specifically in a moment, or action teams, that side of the program. Have you never had action teams before? Is it something you've always felt is a bit murky and mysterious and never got round to? Would you like some dedicated time when thinking about that? Would it be great to book in a CPD in, say, the end of spring term, where we check in against the goals that you set this afternoon, or with our support this afternoon, to keep ourselves accountable and to see how we're getting on with them? Is it about the class meetings? Could be about anything, developments you'd like to see, ideas you've got to improve them, best practice examples of how they've worked in school, how to have differentiated support to get young people accessing them with different educational needs, or anything else. And the point of the anything else is you now need to tell me what would be really helpful. I can see a few people are typing, which is great. Karen's going to be aware of what you're putting in, and we will maybe respond to them before we close in a couple of minutes. But if you do have any ideas for CPD that you'd love us to put on, let us know. And it can be exactly what I think Abigail's just done, which is just to say 1 and 2. So like, of the list we've given here, which of these would you like to see the most? Which ones would be the ones you would attend? So Abigail has said the comms team training and action team training would be something she'd really appreciate. So even if it's just letting us know which one of this list would be on top of your agenda, that would help us massively to know that we're supporting our members in the right way. So yeah, there's another one about 2. Karen, go on, you've got something you want to bring up?
Yeah, I'm just wondering while people are just typing those in, whether you wanted just to mention about what Lorraine asked before, when she asked, do we start class meetings before we set up action teams?
Thank you for reminding me about that, Karen, because I'm a very forgetful human being and I would not have remembered to come back to that. So thanks, Karen. Lorraine, your question is a very good one. The answer to the question is simple, is that the action teams come after you've got an established routine of doing your class meetings, because ultimately, and if you haven't seen this yet, you'll see it when you get to look at the tool that supports the class meeting. Every time you run one, your young people are going to be asked 2 questions: the question that you've selected for that week, and then the question that says, do you have any idea for improvements you'd like to see in school? And that second question is a huge resource in knowing who in school has got an idea to create change, and what is that change about, for you and your comms team to then approach them with a suggestion they become an action team. So it's definitely the case that you start with your class meetings. You might want to do 4 or 5 or more before you consider bringing in the action teams element, when you've got a resource on which you can pull through, and you could even do a bit of filtering of what you think are great suggestions and achievable suggestions, and which ones are a bit more out there, whatever it might be. But that's the relationship between the two. Start with your class meetings, and then when you've got a fertile ground of ideas and know who is suggesting them, you can start to introduce those young people through your leadership group to the action teams and what they can do next. Cool. I think I've answered that question. Sorry for being so scattergun and forgetting things, but that is my personality, I suppose. Any other questions we want to highlight before I mention 1 or 2 more things before? We are overrunning by 1 minute, so I'm very conscious of that, folks. Karen, anything? No? Okay, great. So final thing then from me. One of the events that we know is going to be very helpful and we're very excited to run is happening in the next half term. It's called the Comms Team Live event, which makes me feel like I'm a part of Facebook all of a sudden. And the idea is that it's going to be an afternoon, sort of 45-minute, 50-minute session in which we are going to bring groups of young people who are on the comms team together for some training from us. It's going to be celebratory and fun and engaging. It's going to sort of give them a sense of occasion and importance that they have taken up this position within school, and also give us an opportunity to support you in sharing best practice, in getting them introduced to the roles of what it means to be in the comms team, and training them to a degree to go on and be successful with their role. Now, we will share more about this with you over the course of the next week or two because we're still developing the content, but I want to put it on your radar today, if you haven't heard about it already, that there's this live training event that's going to be held digitally for as many of our member schools to access as they like, for your communications team to celebrate their roles, feel really proud that they're on the comms team, and get some training for us to be successful in their role. So more to come on this. I guess just keep an eye out for the emails and for the tweets and the Facebook posts that we're going to be sharing with you over the course of the next couple of weeks, because we'd love as many of you to come along as possible. So I'll put that on your radar, and then it only leads for us to say then thank you very much for coming along and for spending what is now 48 minutes with us, 49 minutes nearly this afternoon. I apologize for running over. If you need anything, you've got the link in the chat box to book in a one-to-one with the team, or membership at smartschoolcouncils.org.uk is the email should you need anything from us. So what we'll do now is we'll take a pause. I'll shut up, which is a virtue for me, for about 30 seconds. And then if anyone is still here in the session, I'm going to take that as an opportunity for you to talk to us about what's going on with your school. So thanks very much, folks. I'll let Karen say goodbye as well, and then we'll have that 30-second pause. And if you are still here in 30 seconds, we'll know you want to have a chat to us. So Karen, over to you.
I just want to say thanks. Nice to get to know you guys, even though it is virtual. I think we're used to this virtual world that we're in. Also, a special shout out to Merrin. I've just seen that Merrin's already booked a one-to-one support with me, and he posted it in there a couple of minutes ago. So well done you, Merrin. But yeah, looking forward to getting to know you all better over the next year.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Karen. Yes, and thank you all for your very kind comments. I'm glad that this afternoon was very helpful. Hope to see you all again soon, and I'm sure we will. We're going to have this 30 seconds of shutting up now, and if anyone wants to have a chat to us afterwards, we could get into it. So thanks very much.